Spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Could you bring us up to date on this afternoon, what is happening with with Blinken's visit to Israel this afternoon?
Thank you, Dawn. I believe it is the third time, in fact, that the Secretary of State is here during the war. There's one thing which is standing by Israel, but standing in Israel, in fact, just like the U.S. President did, President Biden, which was unprecedented. That really speaks volume, and it really sends a message to all of Israel's adversaries, not only Hamas in the south, but, around the region. Do not test us and do not try us. We have been in lockstep with our American counterparts, our best friends, our best allies, in terms of the goals of this operation, the counteroffensive that we launched in Gaza. And we have been clear. The first goal is to dismantle the Hamas regime. They can simply be no longer. We have decided as a nation that we will no longer live next to a terrorist enclave. And we want to see our sons and daughters, our elderly and toddlers and babies back safe. We're talking about 242 hostages who are still being held captive by Hamas for 27 days now. So we are fully coordinated with the United States. And you mentioned the humanitarian aid that we both want to see entering Gaza from the Rafah border crossing with Egypt.
Tal, Netanyahu said last night that you are at the height of the battle now and that the IDF are deep into Gaza City. Can you bring us up to date on any developments that are actually happening on the ground in Gaza?
Well, Don, I cannot talk about military activity happening right now or about the bigger military strategy, of course, for obvious reasons. That would be irresponsible on my behalf, and I'm sure you can understand. But we can talk again about the goal of what we're doing there, and that is to bring down the Hamas regime, the murderous terrorist regime. We didn't want this war. We weren't even expecting this war. We were dragged into it by Hamas after they butchered, raped, mutilated our nation on October 7th. And please continue, and please remember that they are continuing for 27 days now to fire over 9,000 rockets at Israeli communities and cities. This is a situation that we will no longer tolerate. We consider this to be an existential threat to the state of Israel, and they have to understand that the story of the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland doesn't end on October 7th, 2023.
I have to say that, the Gaza Health Ministry, which obviously is run by Hamas, are saying that, there are 9,000 civilians dead already, including 3,600 Palestinian children. What would you say to those figures? I mean, they are horrific, aren't they?
First, of course, they are horrific. This is terrible. This is a tragedy of war. It's a war that we didn't want, and we don't want it, but we have to defend ourselves. We sure are making every possible effort to minimize the civilian casualties. Not that we can trust these numbers, as you said. They are, they're coming to us from the Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry. They are the people with the guns. They control every piece of information coming out of Gaza. But we are doing everything possible to minimize these tragedies, while Hamas is doing everything possible to maximize the casualties, which means that they are committing a double war crime here, not only against our citizens, but also against the Gazan population. We have been calling for 27 days now on the residents of the northern Gaza Strip, where the heavy fighting is taking place right now, to evacuate to the safer havens that we have designated for them in the southwest, where humanitarian aid is waiting. And we keep urging them to evacuate. And I can tell you the numbers. I'm in about, I think, 1.1 million residents of Gaza live in these areas. And more than 900,000 have already evacuated to these safer havens.
So what would you say to Hamas's allegations that, you are deliberately bombing refugee camps?
No, we are not deliberately bombing refugee camps. What we targeted there is a massive tunnel complex where a top Hamas commander was hiding along with many other Hamas terrorists. This is a legitimate military target, but also, Don, I would like to address this definition, the terminology that you are using. And again, I'm not criticizing you. It's something that we have to address. This is not, the Jabalia neighborhood is not a refugee camp. We're talking about Palestinian residents who were born there in a Palestinian territory, so they cannot be considered refugees. In fact, the only reason why Palestinians themselves keep using this term refugees and run their own dedicated UN agency under the auspices of the United Nations is to perpetuate the conflict and perpetuate the idea that they are refugees for 5 generations now of a war that they themselves started, and they will remain refugees until the state of Israel will cease to exist, which obviously will not happen. So again, under the Palestinian definition of refugees, you and I'm not sure, I don't know about your family lineage, but I should be considered a refugee of Romania and Morocco, and almost every person on this planet should be considered as a refugee if this definition would have applied to them. So these are not really refugees.
Okay, Tal. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is the Israeli Times have shown videos of IDF supposedly abusing Palestinians in the West Bank. I have to ask you about this because it's divided comments on the Israeli Times post. What would you say about those accusations?
Well, I haven't seen these specific videos, so I'm not really familiar with the stories. If there is anything which is out of line happening, of course, we have to address it as a nation. Of course.
You will be if it is found that IDF soldiers have been abusing Palestinian Gaza fighters or civilians, you will be taking action against them.
You mean in the West Bank?
Yes.
I haven't seen any of these specific reports, so I can't really address them. But we will for sure take a look into and we'll inquire. We will investigate. These are things that we have done in the past.
Okay.
When something is wrong, we take responsibility and we address the situation. So we will definitely look into these reports.
And so how frustrating is it for Israel to constantly have the United Nations and various countries around the globe now calling for a ceasefire? What would you say to them?
You see, there was a ceasefire, Dawn, on October 6th. Then on October 7th, Hamas broke it when they massacred us. And there will be a ceasefire again once Hamas threats that their terrorist regime is eliminated and once the hostages are back home safe. But before that, not a minute before that, we cannot have a ceasefire, because that means the people chanting, calling for a ceasefire. But what are they basically saying, Dawn? They're saying that Hamas can get away with what they did and that they can do it again and again and again. And in fact, the top Hamas leader gave an interview, I think, for MSNBC and another interview to a Lebanese channel. And they say that they will perpetrate the October 7th massacre for a second, a third, and a fourth time. And we take their word at face value. This is an existential threat to us. We're taking it that serious. It's a matter of life and death.
So I did see that interview, and it was quite shocking because in that interview he did say that the October 7th attack on Israel of civilians where thousands died was justified, and they would do that again, you know, literally tomorrow, which must have been horrific for everybody in Israel to hear. So, you know, the call for a ceasefire, do you believe that Hamas would ever heed any call for a ceasefire now?
Well, obviously, they would want a ceasefire because they're losing. They know that we're coming after them and we'll find the perpetrators of the October 7th massacre and we'll get to them one after the other. We also warned them, do not hurt the hostages because we will find you. We will find you and we will administer justice. But you see, what we need the international community and international players to do is to put more pressure on Hamas, not on Israel. Not on Israel, because pressure on Hamas, in fact, is working. We see that they already released 4 hostages due to mounting international pressure, and we need to ratchet up the pressure. But, Dawn, I don't see protests against Hamas, not even in the Western world. I don't see widespread media coverage of their atrocities, their history, their ideology, what they stand for, and who they are. And we don't even see mounting pressure on Iran right now, which funds them. Over 93% of Hamas's budget comes from Iran, as we know, and they also 100% fund the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is the second largest terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. But every time, Dawn, someone puts the pressure on Israel, then it serves Hamas's purpose. The more you put pressure on Israel for their use of civilian,
Tal, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. We are running out of time, unfortunately. That's Tal Heinrich from Tel Aviv joining us there. Thank you so much for joining us.